Today we're looking at how to do a live broadcast in a way that makes for a good podcast episode. Because so many live broadcasts make for a horrible podcast episode, so how do we do it well? Remember, this is part of our series on 9 ways to cut the time it takes to ship your show. So this is how to get your show out there in the best, easiest, quickest way possible and get the most from it. And that's today what we're going to do. We're going to get the most from a live broadcast, a podcast, see how to repurpose it. Let's get into it. Hey, so I'm Colin Gray from thepodcasthost.com and alitu.com, and today we're talking about live broadcasts and how they can actually make for a good podcast episode, because you've probably all seen horrible examples of this. People who just take a live broadcast and they just publish the whole thing as a podcast episode. And then you have to listen through like 5, 10, 15 minutes of introductions and, hey, where are you all from? And where, what are you working on just now? And just conversations that work well on live. I mean, that's what makes live broadcasts great, isn't it? It's what makes broadcasts fun. You get in there, you have a chat with a host, there's community vibe, but listening to that afterwards is rubbish. It just makes for terrible content. And then often the actual content itself is so broken up by the questions, by, sort of accounting for really personal little things that people ask in the chat, or the interruptions that are caused by the chat. You're presenting, so many interruptions, so many like, oh, wait a minute, I'm just going to go and look at this bit of the chat. Or, oh no, can people hear me? Is everything going all right? And there's so many things in live broadcasts that don't translate well to a published podcast episode. But there are big upsides if you can make it work, because obviously, if you can do a live broadcast, then that does engage your community. There's so many benefits to it. It engages your community, engages listeners. It brings them in and makes them part of the show. You can even take some of that input, like those questions, those, queries, those things that the people in the audience tell you. And that can make for better content, because it means you don't miss things. It means that you really power your content. You design your content around what your audience wants to hear, because they're there asking you, they're there telling you what they want to hear. So it really can make for better content. And doing it live also, there's the benefit of the fact that you have a routine. If you record at 3 p.m. every Monday, or you at least schedule that ahead of time, there's something really powerful in that habit if you can manage to do it at the same time every single week. That's what makes for a consistent show. And even if you change it every week, at least having it scheduled in ahead of time, and people are going to turn up, people have signed up, that makes you record. There's huge power in going live and making you consistent. So that's really powerful as well. And then the final benefit is that going live mindset. Okay, the fact that you're going out live, it makes you not rely on editing as a crutch. I've talked about this elsewhere. There'll be another video in this series about this too, called minimum effective editing. I'll talk more about this. But just the fact that you're going live means that you just go for it. You gloss over mistakes, you don't stop, you don't trip over your tongue as much, because you're live, you can't stop and edit it. You need to just go for it. And there's real power in that as well. So, like I say, many upsides, many downsides, but we can do it in a way that really mitigates nearly all of those downsides to make for a really good live podcast episode. And that's what I'm going to talk about right here in the following chapters. So how's this going to work? Well, the key is structure. We're going to break this live broadcast into 3 distinct parts. And then we're only going to repurpose some of them. And that's what makes for a great podcast episode, but still a good live episode as well. So let's get into it. Let's do the 3 separate parts. First, we'll go for part number 1. Okay, part 1 of your live broadcast is that really specific live stuff. It's the introductions, the hellos. Like I said, a big part of going live is engaging your audience. It's talking to the people in the audience and really getting their input. You can't do without that on a live broadcast. It's really why people turn up, to interact with you and to feel like they have some input on the content that ensues, okay? So you're gonna take 5 or 10 minutes at the start of the live broadcast and do all the intros. You're gonna say, hey everyone, welcome, where are you all from? And then start reading stuff out of the chat. Say hi to some certain people, the people that turn up all the time, some of the newbies. And then towards the end of that introduction, that like fun kind of interactive part, you say, right, So today we're going to cover the best podcast microphones that you can buy for your podcast. Now tell me, what podcast microphone do you use just now? What are your biggest struggles with podcast microphones? Like, what are your biggest questions around podcast microphones? Okay, so you're going to ask some questions, and then answers to that are going to come in the chat. You're going to see them over there on the right hand side. You're going to see the questions come in. You're maybe going to chat through briefly some of that stuff for a few minutes, wait for it to come in, and then you're going to say, okay, now I'm going to jump into the content, okay? So we're going to spend 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes going through the actual content. Here's my presentation. Now, I'm not going to be looking at the chat during this time, okay? So I won't be responding. We're just going to talk through the content I'll present. But if you stick around and watch this, I'll stay around for another 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the end, and we'll do a Q&A, okay? And I've got your questions here, so I'm going to include some of that inside the presentation, okay? So these questions here, they will power the presentation too, so don't worry, I'm going to answer these questions inside the presentation. Okay, so let's jump into it. I'll come back and I'll chat to you again in 20 minutes, but stick around so that we can have a wee talk after the presentation. Okay, so that's what you do. You present it and you say, that's what we're going to do next. All right, and that leads us to part two. Part two, obviously, is the content. This is the bit you've planned ahead of time. You're going to do a broadcast, you're going to do a live broadcast. You then present however long it takes you to present your content, okay? This is where you've got your bullet point list, your script, whatever that is. But the key here is that you will want to try and work in some of those questions. If you know your topic, then no doubt you'll have covered most of those questions in the presentation anyway. But if you haven't, then generally if you know your topic well enough, it's easy enough to kind of fit them in. You'll remember those questions, you'll know when you're kind of answering something similar, and you can maybe add on a few extra answers based on those questions. Or you could even just take the time at the end of the live, of the prepared presentation part and just answer those questions towards the end. Say, all right, that's my main presentation. Now I'm just going to go through a few of these questions, answer them specifically, and then present them as well. And then only then do you go into part three, which is the Q&A. So part three, the Q&A, the interaction again. It's like an interaction sandwich. You've got interacting with people in the intro at the start, and then you've got just presenting, no interaction, and then you've got interaction at the end again, the Q&A and the chat. So here's where you can then ask people, right, what questions did you have? Anything come up out of that? And this is what makes people stick around and watch the live broadcast and engages them even more, in fact, because they stick around, they then get to talk to you, they then get to discuss what you've just presented, get some extra explanation, get some more detail because they can ask those questions and they can jump in, okay? So the Q&A is really important at the end. Just do that, even if it's only 10 minutes, that can be enough actually to make it really good. And you can do this in under half an hour, 5 minutes for the intro, maybe 15, 20 for the presentation, and then 5 or 10 for the Q&A at the end. And that can be just half an hour, or you can go a full hour and do a much longer episode as well. So that's what you finish up with. Part three, the Q&A, where actually you just let the audience ask their questions, you interact, and you extend on what you've done already. So I explained a little bit earlier why I think this makes better content, but having now explained the structure, I hope that makes it really clear. This really powers better content because you have those questions from the audience at the start that then can influence your presentation. Like I said, you know your topic, so you can often wind those questions into the presentation you already had planned. But then you also have the Q&A at the end, which actually, often they'll be the questions that your audience would have been asking, even if you just put this out as a podcast episode. You record a podcast episode with no input, not live, then often the people listening will have lots of questions about that content. And no doubt there'll be the same questions that the people in your live audience have. So they're there as the proxy for that wider non-live audience. They ask the questions and make it better. So let's get into how to repurpose though. How does this actually work? What do you put out there into the world? Well, here's how it works. You've probably guessed this bit already, but all you really do is cut off that first section, that part one, that interactive part. You don't need that. That's the bit that doesn't work well on a podcast, okay? You take out the introductions, you take out the interaction at the start, and you essentially start the podcast episode just with part two, which is the presentation. You jump straight in there. But like I said, that presentation is empowered, it's improved, it's powered up by those questions you did get at the start, because you'll wind them in. Now, it's your choice if you want to include the Q&A at the end. You might want to cut that out as well. Maybe it is a little bit too waffly, maybe it's a little bit too specific. That can be the problem with live broadcasts. Sometimes the fact that people ask these questions that really only apply to them. Something so specific about their setup or their business or their podcast or their topic that it doesn't apply to anyone else. But on the other hand, a lot of Q&As end up with questions that do apply to lots of different people. So use your judgment. You include the presentation for sure. That'll be the podcast episode. But the Q&A can be really valuable even though the person listening isn't there live. It still might answer the questions that they had about the presentation, because like I said, that audience is a representative of them. So that could work well. So at the end of the day, you're going to take the first bit off, remove part 1, and then publish part 2 plus part 3 as your podcast episode. And that is how to repurpose a live broadcast in a smarter way that really ends up with better content overall as well. So I hope this helps you get more from your content. You know, you're planning a topic, you might as well get more from it. That means going live. It's why so many people do go live at the same time as making a podcast. But using this structure ensures that you make a better podcast episode from that live. And like I've said throughout, I think it makes for better content as well because of that audience interaction. So I hope that helps you do that. Now, please do, if you want to make it easy to do this, please do check out Alitu. Alitu is designed to actually do something like this really easily, because all you can do is upload your recording. So you take that live recording, you can upload video to Alitu, it'll strip out the audio and just use that. Or you can take the audio stream and just upload that part. But the main thing is you can then pop that into the episode builder, and you can use Alitu's audio editor to cut out that part 1 and really, you know, to make it just down to the part 2 and the part 3. You could even split that recording and put a little transition in between to go from the main recording to the Q&A. And you could record an intro as well if you wanted to. So if you want a separate intro, easier to do offline, you can record that directly into Alitu in the episode builder. And you've got those 3 blocks that you can use. And obviously it does the cleanup, it'll do all the leveling, the noise reduction, all that kind of stuff as well for you. So please do check that out. All right, that's it for today. That was another episode of the 9 ways to cut the time it takes to ship your show. If you want to see the other episodes in this series, please do check the description below. You'll see links to everything I've mentioned, plus all of the other episodes, other ways to cut the time it takes to get your podcast out there, to improve your workflow. And please do, as always, hit that little bell, hit that subscribe button so you get all these videos whenever you're checking in to YouTube in future, whenever we put something out new. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.